Hello class, so I'm gonna show you how to do some stuff with the Loom today, and I'm sending you a tutorial on how to set up the Loom, so I'm gonna show you guys more practical skills when working with it after setup. So what I have for you here is I've gone through a few times on the Loom with just the black yarn, and then I finished off that use of the black yarn by just pushing this dowel halfway through, cutting the yarn, and then slipping the extra yarn down through the back of the weaving. And so that was a row that was started from here, and it's just a half row. And then to change colors, what I have is my other dowel with the blue thread, and then I'm going to pull it through and then let the tail just come out the back. And then later you have the opportunity when you're done to tie off any loose tails. The loom kits come with a comb, but I usually just use my fingernail to scrape it down. And for those of you that are confused on how exactly this works, basically you should have slipped alternating rows of these threads that form a grid in your deeper groove, then the shallow groove, then deeper, shallow, and that's the way it should go. I'll send the video for how to do that. But what that lets you do is each row you need to be going over and under the opposite way that the last row went. So with this one, this last thread, my blue yarn went underneath it, so now it needs to go over. So I can actually pivot this, and then it alternates all of the rows that were up are now down, and what was down is now up. And so then I can just slide my dowel through all the opposite rows. This is essentially what the loom is. So one thing I want to note is my first weaving that I ever did, it ended up getting tighter and tighter and tighter and becoming more triangular. And so I learned from that that when you move onto another row, you need to leave just a little bit of extra yarn. You don't want to pull this tight. So you can see there's a little bit of extra yarn, and then I slide it down. You do not want to be pulling, because your weaving will just become narrower and narrower as you go. So then, as I did before, flip, so that way now this last piece of yarn ended over this, so now it needs to go under. So this is essentially what we did with the beads, only you have a bit of technology to save you some time. So leaving a little extra so it doesn't pull and start becoming triangular. So I'll just do a couple more rows, and then I will show you how to do some more intricate free weaving stuff. So you can do really interesting things just with two colors of yarn like I have here, as long as they're contrasting. So then I need to flip those threads again. And then I'll do one more. Okay. So I'm just gonna end this block color. I'll do the same thing I did with the black, which is I will switch my cloths, pull this through just about half of them, pull this out, and then snip it. So this is when you're changing, this is a simple way to change out your threads, and then you can just tuck it here. Alright, so that's how you do it, just straightforward. But I want to show you guys how to do more intricate stuff. So say you wanted to create some patterns. Each of you should have gotten either a wooden dowel, a little wooden sort of, I don't know, tool, or one of these larger needles, and I'll use these both, but this is for more intricate free weaving. So say I want a bit of a triangular pattern in black, and then I'll go around with the blue. What you can do is use your smaller needle to decide how that's going to go. That looks like a good size for the base of my triangle. Oops. So again, I'm just going to let this last part of the yarn be just a tail that gets tucked in. Okay, and this fell off. So different people use this differently. I just tie it off till later. Okay, so then once I've got just this little area, then I'll go back alternating. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my triangle pattern narrower each time I go across. So then this one, let's just skip that last part. You may need to practice a bit for the free weaving to figure out kind of what shapes you can get out of this. How many times should you repeat rows? One thing that's kind of interesting about rendering or drawing with this is that you can see here these rows are very straight. Once you start free weaving, they're going to start getting a lot wavier. I'll show you in a second what that looks like, but it can start setting off some really interesting patterns to the actual weaving itself. Just remember to always alternate. So if the previous row was over, you need to go under in the next row. So now my triangle is getting narrower and narrower. It's possible to render out something if you have the right colors. Okay, so I'll begin to end this section and I'll go over the blue. So I'll just end that there. I'll leave myself a tail for tucking in. Tail here. Okay, so then that tail will get worked in later. And then now with this one, I'll free weave around here. Okay. Again, to start a new color, you just leave a bit of a tail dangling out, and then you're always going to push the yarn down. So now you can see with my free weaving, there's a bit of an interesting shape to now deal with. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, oops. Over, watch out for your little tail. So you can just tuck them in like that. So you could flip this back and forth to make it a little easier for yourself, but I find that when I'm working with the free weaving needles, I don't necessarily need to. That you can make a loom with just some pegs and a board, that as long as the structure stays grid-like. You can use your hands just like we did with the seed beads. Okay, so I gotta pull this back to make sure it doesn't get too tight, or else my weaving will start coming in. And then I'm just taking my fingers. I'm curious how the blue yarn is gonna start sort of changing form around that free woven section. The next material I'll be showing you all is embroidery, and your weavings are dense enough that you can actually push an embroidery needle up through a weaving. I don't know how good that would look, but it's doable. Under, over, under, over. And so then the last thing I will do is I will transition back to the black. Go halfway through. Cut this. So this can just be a tail we deal with later. Then I can jump back to something like a black thread over there. Okay. You can do really fine moments. Looking at this, I would probably, if I plan this out more, I would want to do kind of like a scale, diamond scale pattern. So I'll just show you one last time how to start a new color. Just let there be a bit of a thread tail at the end. Put it in. Switch direction of the threads. And every once in a while this will fall off. It's fine. You want to take the time to carefully restring it up. But it's important to note that there's not one piece of yarn for every divot in this, and so you have to position them carefully. You should avoid the ones at the outer edge because this needs to rest on these edges. So you need to kind of account for that as much as you can. If you just look at how mine are positioned, if you're around there, you're okay. Just know you skip a few every now and then when you're setting it up. And so what you get with the alternating colors is some pretty great contrast. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show you with the loom. Just some of the more kind of irregular ways of using it. It's very much drawing, in my opinion. You have the opportunity to render out. What's nice is that it naturally does a lot of straight horizontals, but I really love seeing what happens when the pattern has to account for irregularities, like that little mound I put in. So as you can see, it's really easy to use the smaller needles to work a little bit more free form with this, but then I just wanted to show you that then you can go back to some more linear moments. You know, if I wanted to go in with the blue yarn and just go back and forth over here, make myself a semicircle, you could do that, then work the black thread over this way. There's just a lot of freedom with this material, so I hope that was helpful.